Book 68, Adha Festival Sacrifice Adaahi. Narrated Al-Bahra. The Prophet said, on the day of Eid al-Adha, the first thing we will do on this day of ours, is to further Eid prayer and then return to slaughter the sacrifice. Whoever does so, he acted according to our Sunnah, tradition, and whoever slaughtered the sacrifice before the prayer, what he offered was just meat he presented to his family, and that will not be considered as nuzak, sacrifice. On hearing that, Abu Burda bin Nur got up, for he had slaughtered the sacrifice before the prayer, and said, I have got a 6-month-old ram. The Prophet said, slaughter it, as a sacrifice, but it will not be sufficient for anyone else, as a sacrifice after you. Al-Bara added, the Prophet said, whoever slaughtered the sacrifice after the prayer, he slaughtered it at the right time and followed the tradition of the Muslims. Narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, whoever slaughtered the sacrifice before the prayer, he just slaughtered it for himself, and whoever slaughtered it after the prayer, he slaughtered it at the right time and followed the tradition of the Muslims. Narrated Uqba bin Amir al-Juhani, that the Prophet distributed among his companions some animals for sacrifice, to be slaughtered on Eid al-Adha. Uqba's share was a Jada'a, a 6-month-old goat. Uqba said, O Allah's Apostle, I get in my share of Jada'a, a 6-month-old ram. The Prophet said, slaughter it as a sacrifice. Narrated Aisha, that the Prophet entered upon her when she had her menses at Sarif before entering Mecca, and she was weeping, because she was afraid that she would not be able to perform the Hajj. The Prophet said, what is wrong with you? Have you got your period? She said, yes. He said, this is a matter Allah has decreed for all the daughters of Adam, so perform all the ceremonies of Hajj like the others, but do not perform the tawaf around the Kaaba. Aisha added, when we were at Mina, beef was brought to me and I asked, what is this? They, the people, said, Allah's Apostle has slaughtered some cows as sacrifices on behalf of his wives. Narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said on the day of Nahr, whoever has slaughtered his sacrifice before the prayer, should repeat it, slaughter another sacrifice. A man got up and said, O Allah's Apostle, this is a day on which meat is desired. He then mentioned his neighbors saying, I have a 6-month-old ram which is to me better than the meat of 2 sheep. The Prophet allowed him to slaughter it as a sacrifice, but I do not know whether this permission was valid for other than that man or not. The Prophet then went towards 2 rams and slaughtered them, and then the people went towards some sheep and distributed them among themselves. Narrated Abu Bakr, the Prophet said, time has come back to its original state which it had on the day Allah created the heavens and the earth. The year is 12 months, 4 of which are sacred, 3 of them are in succession, namely Dhul-Qa'dah, Dhul-Hijjah and Muharram, the 4th being Rajab Muda, which is between Jumadah, Athdamj and Shaban. The Prophet then asked, which month is this? We said, Allah and his Apostle know better. He kept silent so long that we thought that he would call it by a name other than its real name. He said, isn't it the month of Dhul-Hijjah? We said, yes. He said, which town is this? We said, Allah and his Apostle know better. He kept silent so long that we thought that he would call it a name other than its real name. He said, isn't it the town of Mecca? We replied, yes. He said, what day is today? We replied, Allah and his Apostle know better. He kept silent so long that we thought that he would call it by a name other than its real name. He said, isn't it the day of Nahr? We replied, yes. He then said, your blood, properties and honor are as sacred to one another as this day of yours in this town of yours in this month of yours. You will meet your Lord, and he will ask you about your deeds. Beware. Do not go astray after me by cutting the necks of each other. It is incumbent upon those who are present to convey this message to those who are absent, for some of those to whom it is conveyed may comprehend it better than some of those who have heard it directly. Muhammad, the sub-narrator, on mentioning this used to say, the Prophet then said, no doubt. Haven't I delivered Allah's message to you? Haven't I delivered Allah's message to you? Narrated Nafi, Abdullah bin Amr used to slaughter his sacrifice at the slaughtering place, the slaughtering place of the Prophet. Ibn Amr said, Allah's apostle used to slaughter camels and sheep, etc., as sacrifices at the Musalla. Narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet used to offer 2 rams as sacrifices, and I also used to offer 2 rams. Narrated Anas, Allah's apostle came towards 2 horned rams having black and white colors and slaughtered them with his own hands. Narrated Uqba bin Amir, that the Prophet gave him some sheep to distribute among his companions to slaughter as sacrifices, Idalada. A kid was left and he told the Prophet of that, whereupon he said to him, slaughter it as a sacrifice, on your behalf. Narrated Al-Bara bin Azib, an uncle of mine called Abu Burda, slaughtered his sacrifice before the Eid prayer. So Allah's apostle said to him, your slaughtered sheep was just mutton, not a sacrifice. Abu Burda said, O Allah's apostle, I have got a domestic kid. The Prophet said, slaughter it as a sacrifice, but it will not be permissible for anybody other than you. The Prophet added, whoever slaughtered his sacrifice before the Eid prayer, he only slaughtered for himself, and whoever slaughtered it after the prayer, he offered his sacrifice properly and followed the tradition of the Muslims. Narrated Al-Bara, Abu Burda slaughtered the sacrifice before the Eid prayer, whereupon the Prophet said to him, slaughter another sacrifice instead of that. Abu Burda said, I have nothing except a Jada'a. Shubha said, perhaps Abu Burda also said that Jada'a was better than an old sheep in his opinion. The Prophet said, never mind, slaughter it to make up for the other one, but it will not be sufficient for anyone else after you. Narrated Anas, the Prophet slaughtered 2 rams, black and white in color, as sacrifices, and I saw him putting his foot on their sides and mentioning Allah's name and takbir, Allahu Akbar. Then he slaughtered them with his own hands. Narrated Aisha, Allah's apostle entered upon me at Sarif while I was weeping, because I was afraid that I would not be able to perform their Hajj. He said, what is wrong with you? Have you got your period? I replied, yes. He said, this is a matter Allah has decreed for all the daughters of Adam, so perform the ceremonies of the Hajj as the pilgrims do, but do not perform the tawaf around the Kaaba. Allah's apostle slaughtered some cows as sacrifices on behalf of his wives. Narrated Al-Bara, I heard the Prophet delivering a sermon, and he said, on the day of Eid the first thing we will do on this day of ours is that we will offer the Eid prayer, then we will return and slaughter our sacrifices, and whoever does so, then indeed he has followed our tradition, and whoever slaughtered his sacrifice before the prayer, what he offered was just meat that he presented to his family, and that was not a sacrifice. Abu Burda got up and said, O Allah's apostle, I slaughtered the sacrifice before the prayer and I have got a Jada'a which is better than an old sheep. The Prophet said, slaughter it to make up for that, but it will not be sufficient for anybody else after you. Narrated Anas, the Prophet said, whoever slaughtered the sacrifice before the Eid prayer, should repeat it, slaughter another one. A man said this is the day on which meat is desired. Then he mentioned the need of his neighbors for meat, and the Prophet seemed to accept his excuse. The man said, I have a Jada'a which is to me better than 2 sheep. The Prophet allowed him to slaughter it as a sacrifice. But I do not know whether this permission was general for all Muslims or not. The Prophet then went towards 2 rams and slaughtered them, and the people went towards their sheep and slaughtered them. Narrated Jundab bin Sufyan al-Bajli, I witnessed the Prophet on the day of Nahr. He said, whoever slaughtered the sacrifice before offering the Eid prayer, should slaughter another sacrifice in its place, and whoever has not slaughtered their sacrifice yet, should slaughter now. Narrated Al-Bara, one day Allah's apostle offered the Eid prayer and said, whoever offers our prayer and faces our Qibla should not slaughter the sacrifice till he finishes the Eid prayer. Abu Burda bin Nar got up and said, O Allah's apostle, I have already done it. The Prophet said, that is something you have done before its due time. Abu Burda said, I have a Jada'a which is better than 2 old sheep, shall I slaughter it? The Prophet said, yes, but it will not be sufficient for anyone after you. Narrated Anas, The Prophet used to offer as sacrifices 2 horned rams, black and white in color, and used to put his foot on their sides and slaughter them with his own hands. Narrated Anas, the Prophet offered as sacrifices 2 horned rams, black and white in color. He slaughtered them with his own hands and mentioned Allah's name over them and said Takbir and put his foot on their sides. Narrated Masruq, that he came to Aisha and said to her, O mother of the believers, there is a man who sends a Hadi to Kaaba and stays in his city and requests that his Hadi camel be garlanded while he remains in a state of ihram from that day till the people finish their ihram, after completing all the ceremonies of Hajj. What do you say about it? Masruq added, I heard the clapping of her hands behind their curtain. She said, I used to twist the garlands for the Hadi of Allah's Apostle and he used to send his Hadi to Kaaba, but he never used to regard as unlawful what was lawful for men to do with their wives till the people returned from the Hajj. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, during the lifetime of the Prophet we used to take with us the meat of the sacrifices of Eid al-Adha to Medina. The narrator often said, the meat of the Hadi. Narrated Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, that once he was not present at the time of Eid al-Adha, and when he came, some meat was presented to him. And the people said to him, this is the meat of our sacrifices. He said, take it away, I shall not taste it. In his narration, Abu Sa'id added, I got up and went to my brother, Abu Qatada, who was his maternal brother and was one of the warriors of the Battle of Badr, and mentioned that to him he said, a new verdict was given in your absence, that is, meat of sacrifices was allowed to be stored and eaten later on. Narrated Salama bin al-Aqwa, the Prophet said, whoever has slaughtered a sacrifice should not keep anything of its meat after 3 days. When it was the next year the people said, O Allah's Apostle, shall we do as we did last year? He said, eat of it and feed of it to others and store of it, for in that year the people were having a hard time and I wanted you to help the needy. Narrated Aisha, we used to salt some of the meat of sacrifice and present it to the Prophet at Medina. Once he said, do not eat of that meat for more than 3 days. That was not a final order, but that year he wanted us to feed of it to others. Allah knows better. Narrated Abu Ubaid, the freed slave of Ibn Azar, that he witnessed the day of Eid al-Adha with Ammar bin al-Khattab. Ammar offered the Eid prayer before the sermon and then delivered the sermon before the people, saying, O people! Allah's Apostle has forbidden you to fast on the first day of each of these 2 Eidah, for one of them is the day of breaking your fast, and the other is the one on which you eat the meat of your sacrifices. Narrated Abu Ubaid, in continuation of 478. Then I witnessed the Eid with Uthman bin Affan, and that was on a Friday. He offered the prayer before the sermon, saying, O people! Today you have 2 Eids, festivals, together, so whoever of those who live at Halali, suburbs, would like to wait for the Jumu'ah prayer, he may wait, and whoever would like to return home, is granted my permission to do so. Then I witnessed the Eids with Ali bin Abi Talib, and he too offered the Eid prayer before the sermon and then delivered the sermon before the people and said, Allah's Apostle has forbidden you to eat the meat of your sacrifices for more than 3 days. Narrated Salim, Abdullah bin Ammar said, Allah's Apostle said, eat of the meat of sacrifices of Eid al-Adha for 3 days. When Abdullah departed from Mina, he used to eat bread with oil, lest he should eat of the meat of Hadi, which is regarded as unlawful after the 3 days of the Eid.